What if I told you that the greatest battle of human existence is not fought on distant battlefields, but inside your own mind? Every single day, you are pulled between two forces, the call of discipline and duty, and the temptation of comfort and pleasure. This struggle shapes every decision you make, from how you start your mornings to how you face your final moments. More than 2,000 years ago, philosophers already framed this duel as the clash between Stoicism and Epicureanism. But here is the shocking truth, that ancient debate is still alive today, hidden behind the hustle culture of Navy SEALs like Jocko Willink and the lifestyle design movement of authors like Tim Ferriss. You are living this war without even realizing it. The Stoics, led by thinkers such as Zeno, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius, stood as architects of inner strength. Epictetus once declared, "A difficulty shows what men are." Meanwhile, Epicurus and his followers designed a philosophy of happiness rooted in tranquility and friendship. Epicurus reminded us, it is not what we have, but what we enjoy that constitutes our abundance. Two opposing forces, two visions of peace. One promises unshakable virtue, the other offers calculated serenity. And the question is not which philosophy is better, but which one will define the way you live your life. Welcome to the Stoic Lighthouse. Let this channel guide you toward peace and wisdom, cutting through the fog of daily confusion. If you seek clarity in a world drowning in noise, hit the like button and subscribe now so you never miss the light we bring each week. Because today, we are not just talking about history, we are stepping into an ancient battlefield that still rages within you. Before we begin, remember, every philosophy is only as powerful as its practice. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." So, are you ready to discover whether you are the soldier of the soul or the gardener of tranquility? Let's dive into the first myth. Number 1, breaking the myths. The emotionless Stoic versus the party-loving Epicurean. For centuries, both Stoicism and Epicureanism have been buried under layers of misunderstanding. Before we can truly compare them, we must first remove the masks that history and pop culture have forced upon these philosophies. When most people hear the word Stoic today, they imagine someone cold, detached, a machine without feelings. Hollywood has reinforced this image through characters who stare down tragedy with stone faces, never shedding a tear. But that is not Stoicism, that is fiction. The Stoics never taught us to kill our emotions, they taught us to control them. What they pursued was not apathy, but apatheia, a serenity born from reason, where one's judgment is never hijacked by irrational passions. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, was not a lifeless man. He mourned the loss of his teacher Crates, shedding tears like any human being. The difference was that his grief did not enslave him or dictate his choices. As Seneca later explained, pain, joy, and even fear are natural. The question is whether you remain their master or become their prisoner. Marcus Aurelius echoed this by writing, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." On the opposite side, the caricature of the Epicurean is equally distorted. Today, Epicurean is often used as a synonym for hedonism, for someone who indulges in endless banquets, expensive wines, and extravagant pleasures. A life of constant feasting and entertainment. But this picture is far from reality. Epicurus himself lived on bread, water, and occasionally a small piece of cheese as a luxury. The pleasure he sought was not the fleeting rush of indulgence, but a deeper, lasting peace. He distinguished between kinetic pleasures, like satisfying hunger, and static pleasures, the state of contentment when no pain or disturbance remains. Epicurus taught, of all the things which wisdom provides to make life entirely happy, much the greatest is the possession of friendship. For him, the highest joy was not in feasts, but in friendship, simplicity, and the absence of anxiety. His famous garden was not a place of wild parties, but of quiet conversations and shared bread among equals. Modern thinkers like Alain de Botton remind us that Epicurean philosophy was less about adding pleasures and more about removing sources of distress. So the battlefield is not between emotionless robots and drunken partygoers. It is between two different kinds of serenity: the Stoic pursuit of apatheia, the fortress of the mind built through virtue, and the Epicurean pursuit of ataraxia, the quiet calm achieved by minimizing unnecessary pain. Both seek peace, but by radically different strategies. Number 2, the ultimate goal: virtue as the inner fortress versus pleasure as the secret garden. At the core of every philosophy lies one burning question: what is the highest good? What is the final destination that should guide every decision we make? For the Stoics, the answer was crystal clear and uncompromising: the supreme good is virtue. For the Epicureans, it was equally clear but strikingly different: the supreme good is pleasure. And in that single difference, we uncover two radically opposed ways of building a life. For the Stoics, virtue is excellence of character. It is the daily practice of wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. Everything else, absolutely everything, falls into the category of indifference. Wealth, poverty, fame, obscurity, health, illness, even life and death themselves. None of these things are good or bad in themselves. They are raw material. What matters is how you use them. You can be courageous in poverty or wealthy in vice. The only thing that counts is whether your choices reflect virtue. Epictetus, born a slave and rising to become a philosopher whose words still guide us, summarized it powerfully: it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. This is why the Stoic life is often described as building a fortress within. The walls are not made of stone, but of character. Inside that fortress, peace is not the goal, but the byproduct of living virtuously. In modern times, Ryan Holiday has reminded millions that the true value of Stoicism lies in intention. He often says that for the Stoic, the worth of life comes from acting rightly, regardless of the outcome. The Epicureans, however, looked at the same question through a different lens. For them, the goal of life is pleasure, but not the shallow pursuit of indulgence. Epicurus taught that true pleasure is freedom from pain and anxiety, a state of lasting tranquility. Virtue still mattered deeply, but for the Epicurean, it was not the end in itself. It was the smartest tool to achieve peace. After all, a dishonest man lives in fear of being exposed, a coward in fear of every shadow, and a fool in constant regret. Virtue, then, is the most reliable path to pleasure. Epicurus explained it with clarity: it is impossible to live a pleasant life without living wisely and honorably and justly. The subtle but vital difference is this: for the Stoic, virtue is the cause, and peace is the effect. For the Epicurean, peace is the cause, and virtue is the effect. One philosophy tells you to stand tall in the arena of life, no matter the blows. The other invites you to cultivate a secret garden of serenity, carefully pruning away every source of disturbance. Modern Stoic voices like Massimo Pigliucci emphasize this distinction when comparing the two schools. He notes that for the Stoic, the key question is this action virtuous? For the Epicurean, the key question is, will this action in the long run reduce pain and increase tranquility? One philosophy anchors life in duty, the other in calculation. One builds an inner fortress, the other designs a hidden garden. Both roads claim to lead to happiness. But which road will you trust when the storms of life arrive at your door? Number 3. Worldviews collide, a universe with purpose, Stoics, versus a universe of atoms, Epicureans. Every philosophy of life rests on a foundation. Before it tells you how to act, it tells you what the world is and what it means. The Stoics and Epicureans lived in the same ancient world, but their visions of reality could not have been more different. And those visions shaped everything about how they thought life should be lived. For the Stoics, the universe was not chaos, it was order. They inherited the insights of Heraclitus, who spoke of the Logos, a rational principle that governs all things. The Stoics refined this into a worldview where everything, from the birth of a star to the fall of a leaf, happens according to reason. The universe itself is alive, rational and purposeful. Chrysippus, one of the greatest systematizers of Stoicism, made this conviction unshakable. Chrysippus taught, "The universe itself is God, and the breath that permeates it is divine." This means nothing is random. Every trial, every loss, every moment of joy is part of a vast interwoven plan. For Marcus Aurelius, this worldview was the anchor that gave him strength as emperor. In his meditations, he reminded himself daily to accept whatever came because it was part of nature's design. To a Stoic, living according to nature means aligning your choices with this grand order. William Burvine, a modern interpreter of Stoicism, explains that this belief gives Stoics not just resilience, but gratitude, even for hardships, because every hardship is training material for the soul. Now contrast that with the Epicureans. For them, the universe was not purposeful. It was atoms and void. They followed Democritus, who first described reality as an endless dance of atoms colliding in the infinite empty space. For Epicurus, the gods might exist, but if they did, they were material beings living in perfect detachment, utterly uninterested in human affairs. No providence, no fate, no divine plan, just the movement of atoms, some necessary, some random. The poet Lucretius, in his masterpiece On the Nature of Things, captured this radical idea. Nothing can be created from nothing, and nothing can be reduced to nothing. This worldview liberated the Epicureans from fear. No angry gods waiting to punish you, no eternal torment after death, no cosmic script forcing you into suffering. Life is short, and the only rational response is to make it as tranquil and joyful as possible. Modern voices like Carl Sagan echoed this perspective centuries later, marveling at the grandeur of a universe without imposed purpose. One where meaning must be crafted by us, not handed down from above. So here we stand, between two cathedrals of thought. The Stoics sees the cosmos as a temple, alive with divine reason, calling him to play his part with virtue. The Epicurean sees the cosmos as a marketplace of chance, atoms colliding, inviting him to seek wisdom by choosing the path that maximizes peace. One philosophy roots your life in destiny, the other roots it in freedom. The question for you is this: which vision gives you more strength when you wake up tomorrow morning? Number 4, facing pain. Endure with honor or escape with wisdom. It is easy to sound wise when life is smooth. The real test of any philosophy comes when pain knocks at your door, whether it is the pain of illness, betrayal, loss, or failure. How should we respond when life delivers its harshest blows? For the Stoics and the Epicureans, this question became the dividing line between two radically different approaches to human suffering. For the Stoics, pain was never an enemy. It was the training ground of virtue. They classified pain as an indifferent, neither good nor bad in itself. The true danger was not the pain, but the way you responded to it. If you complained, panicked, or surrendered your character, then you had failed the test. But if you endured with courage and dignity, then you had turned pain into a forge for the soul. Musonius Rufus, often called the Roman Socrates, knew this truth firsthand. Exiled and forced into hard labor, he reminded his students, "It is not hardship that stops philosophy, but an easy life." This is why the Stoic treats suffering like a sparring partner, sent by the Logos to strengthen him. James Stockdale, the American Navy pilot shot down over Vietnam, drew from Stoicism to survive years of torture and isolation. He later reflected that it was not the absence of pain that saved him, but the inner discipline to face it without surrendering his principles. The Stoic question is always, how can I use this suffering to become stronger? The Epicureans, however, looked at this strategy with suspicion. Why willingly embrace unnecessary suffering? If the highest good is tranquility, then the rational course is to minimize pain, not glorify it. For them, wisdom meant managing pain with intelligence. Epicurus argued that intense pain is usually short-lived, while long-lasting pain tends to be mild enough to endure. He encouraged his followers to focus on pleasant memories when enduring pain, transforming the mind's focus away from distress. Epicurus explained, "Continuous pain does not last long in the body. Intense pain is short, and pain that just exceeds pleasure lasts only a few days." For the Epicurean, life is not an arena to prove toughness. It is a voyage where storms should be avoided if possible. Imagine two sailors at sea. The Stoic sets his jaw and sails straight into the storm to test his strength, while the Epicurean studies the winds and redirects his ship to calmer waters. Both reach the shore, but by opposite routes. Modern voices reflect this divide as well. Tim Ferriss, often admired for his Stoic experiments, also reveals a deeply Epicurean streak in his search for life hacks that reduce unnecessary friction and suffering. In contrast, William Burvine stresses the Stoic practice of voluntary discomfort, fasting, cold showers, or physical exertion to build resilience before real hardships arrive. So, two philosophies, two responses. The Stoic says, stand firm. Suffering is the weight that builds your inner strength. The Epicurean says, be wise. Suffering is the enemy, and the wise man avoids it whenever he can. The battlefield of pain reveals who you are, the fighter who embraces difficulty or the strategist who sidesteps it. Number 5. The pleasure dilemma, a dangerous trap or the true path. If pain is one side of the coin, pleasure is the other. And perhaps no question reveals the difference between Stoics and Epicureans more clearly than this. What role should pleasure play in a life well lived? Epicurus shocked the world with his answer. He taught that pleasure is the supreme good, but not the kind of pleasure his enemies accused him of chasing. He was not calling us to endless parties or indulgence. He was calling us to peace. Epicurus distinguished between fleeting pleasures, what he called kinetic pleasures like the taste of food when you are hungry, and the deeper, lasting satisfaction he called static pleasure, the calm state when no pain or anxiety remains. His prescription for happiness was not excess, but subtraction. Remove unnecessary desires, and you will remove the anxiety that ruins life. Epicurus warned, nothing is enough for the man to whom enough is too little. That is why he divided desires into 3 categories. Natural and necessary desires, food, shelter, friendship, are easy to satisfy and bring deep relief. Natural but unnecessary desires, luxury meals, stylish clothes, extravagant homes may entertain, but they also create dependency. And then there are the vain desires, fame, limitless wealth, power that never end and always enslave. The wise man minimizes his desires so he can maximize his peace. In a way, Epicurus was an ancient minimalist, centuries before the concept became a cultural trend in America. The Stoics, however, took a different stance. Pleasure for them could never be the highest good. It is too fragile, too dependent on what lies outside of us. The Stoic enjoyed pleasures when they came, but treated them as preferred indifference, pleasant but irrelevant to the true measure of a good life. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself constantly that fortune could take away comfort at any moment. True happiness had to be anchored in virtue, not in pleasure. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not hanker after what you do not have." Instead, fix your attentions on the finest and best that you have, and imagine how much you would long for these if they were not in your possession. For the Stoic, pleasure is like good weather on a journey. Nice to have, but irrelevant to the mission. The destination is virtue. If the skies are clear, walk on. If the storm breaks, walk on. What matters is how you travel, not whether the sun is shining. Modern interpreters help us grasp this tension. Massimo Pigliucci reminds us that the Stoic does not reject pleasure, but enjoys it with what he calls the reserve clause. Always aware it can be lost, and never dependent on it for happiness. Meanwhile, the Epicurean approach resonates today in movements like the wellness industry and intentional living, where people prioritize simplicity and friendship over material success. So we face the dilemma: is pleasure a dangerous trap luring us into dependency and weakness? Or is it the true path when pursued wisely, leading to calm and freedom? One philosophy trains you to be indifferent to pleasure, the other to master it. And your choice between them will reveal whether you see life as a battlefield to endure or a garden to cultivate. Number 6. Death's confrontation. Nothing to fear versus a natural ending. No philosophy can claim to guide us through life unless it also prepares us for death. For both the Stoics and the Epicureans, fear of death was the greatest thief of human peace. It poisons our days with anxiety and robs us of the present. But although both schools sought to disarm this fear, their strategies could not have been more different. Epicurus approached death with a razor-sharp logic. For him, death is the absence of sensation. If you are not there to experience it, how can it harm you? Just as you did not suffer before you were born, you will not suffer after you die. To fear death is to misunderstand reality. The Roman poet Lucretius, the greatest voice of Epicurean thought, preserved this insight in unforgettable words. Death is nothing to us, since when we exist, death is not present, and when death is present, we no longer exist. This simple reasoning shattered the terror of the grave. To the Epicurean, the wise life is one freed from illusions of punishment or eternal torment. Life is short, so live it fully. Death is nothing more than the end of sensation, nothing to fear. The Stoics arrived at peace about death by a different path. For them, death is not the end of meaning, but part of a greater order. The universe is a cycle of creation and destruction, and we are but actors in its grand play. To rebel against death is to rebel against nature itself. Marcus Aurelius, who buried children, friends, and fellow soldiers while knowing his own end was near, urged himself to welcome death with dignity. Do not despise death, but be content with it, since this too is one of the things that nature wills. To the Stoic, death is not an enemy but a teacher. By remembering that life is short, the Stoic sharpens his focus on what truly matters. This practice, known as memento mori, is not meant to terrify, but to inspire. William Burvine explains that reflecting on death is like polishing a lens. It clears away distractions and allows us to see what is truly valuable. Modern culture often runs from death, covering it with distractions, youth obsessions, and endless entertainment. But these two ancient schools invite us to face it head-on. The Epicurean whispers, "Do not worry, you won't be there to feel it." The Stoic replies, "Do not worry, it is simply part of the cosmic design." Both lead us to the same place, freedom from fear, and so we are left with a choice. When you think about your own end, will you find comfort in the cold logic of Epicurus or in the cosmic acceptance of Marcus Aurelius? One offers peace through reason, the other through alignment with nature. Both promise a life not overshadowed by death. Number 7. Role in society. The Stoic citizen of the world versus the Epicurean wise man in the garden. A philosophy is never just about the self. It also shapes how we show up in the world and what responsibilities we carry toward others. Here, the difference between Stoics and Epicureans widens into a canyon. For the Stoic, life is about duty, engagement, and serving the larger human community. For the Epicurean, life is about retreat, friendship, and building small circles of peace. Two paths, two radically different ways of belonging. The Stoics were natural cosmopolitans. They believed every human carries a spark of the logos, the rational principle that binds us all. This meant that we are citizens not just of Rome or Athens, but of the entire cosmos. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor burdened with enormous responsibility, wrote to himself in his Meditations, "What is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bee." For Marcus Aurelius, virtue was inseparable from service. A Stoic could not lock himself away from the problems of his city or his people. Duty demanded action. That is why so many Stoics, Cato in politics, Musonius Rufus as a teacher, and Marcus Aurelius on the throne, lived in the public arena, shaping society through their example. Modern interpreters like Sharon Labelle emphasize that real Stoic happiness is tied to justice, fairness, and engagement with others. The Epicureans, however, saw public life as a trap. Politics, ambition, and power struggles created turmoil that threatened tranquility. For them, the wise choice was withdrawal, building a private life of simplicity and friendship. Epicurus advised his followers with the famous phrase, "Laeth biosas," live unnoticed. His garden in Athens became the model, an intentional community where men, women, and even slaves gathered to practice philosophy, share meals, and cultivate calm. Epicurus declared, "Of all the things which wisdom provides to make life entirely happy, the greatest is the possession of friendship." And to him, friendship was the safest harbor against the storms of society. And in many ways, this philosophy resonates with our modern age. In an era of digital noise, political division, and burnout culture, more and more people retreat to gardens of their own. Private communities, minimalist lifestyles, or circles of chosen friends who provide shelter from the chaos. The Stoic calls you to the battlefield of society, reminding you that your virtue is tested in service to the whole. The Epicurean invites you into the garden, reminding you that peace is fragile and must be protected. Do you find purpose in the buzzing hive of responsibility or in the quiet of a well-tended garden? Number 8. The Daily Toolkit. How to live like each of them today. A philosophy that cannot be lived is just decoration for the mind. The reason Stoicism and Epicureanism survived for more than 2,000 years is because they were not theories, but toolkits. Practical systems you could use every single day. Each gave their followers exercises to build resilience, peace, and clarity. And even now, in a world of smartphones and constant noise, those tools remain as sharp as ever. The Stoic toolkit begins with the dichotomy of control. Each morning, remind yourself what lies within your power and what does not. Epictetus insisted that freedom is found only in controlling your own judgments and choices, never in controlling the world. This practice is still life-changing today. Another essential exercise is journaling. Seneca urged reflection at the end of each day. What did I do well? Where did I fall short? What can I improve tomorrow? This habit of self-examination builds moral clarity over time. And then there is premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. By imagining worst-case scenarios in advance, you rob fear of its power and strengthen gratitude for what you already have. Epictetus reminded his students, "We suffer not from the events in our lives, but from our judgments about them." Modern Stoic voices like James Stockdale proved these tools work under the harshest conditions. As a prisoner of war, he credited Stoic practice with keeping him sane and strong. And William Burvine encourages even voluntary discomfort, skipping meals, cold showers, physical strain, as training for when real hardship arrives. This is Stoicism in action, deliberate practice to forge an unshakable fortress within. The Epicurean Toolkit looks different but no less practical. At its heart is the tetrapharmakos, the fourfold cure. Do not fear the gods, do not worry about death. What is good is easy to get, and what is terrible is easy to endure. This short mantra functioned as a mental shield against anxiety. Epicureans also analyzed desires daily. Is this desire natural and necessary, natural but unnecessary, or vain and empty? That simple question cuts through consumerism and reveals what truly matters. And perhaps their most profound tool was the cultivation of friendship. Epicurus saw friendship not as luxury, but as necessity, the greatest safeguard of happiness. Epicurus assured his followers, of all the means to ensure happiness throughout the whole life, by far the most important is the acquisition of friends. In modern terms, the Epicurean Toolkit resembles the minimalist and intentional living movements that many Americans embrace today. By simplifying, by cutting away excess, by building circles of trust, you reduce anxiety and cultivate lasting peace. As Montaigne, inspired by Epicurean thought, once reflected, the greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. So here we are, with two toolkits on the table. One builds toughness through discipline, forging a mind that cannot be broken. The other builds tranquility through wisdom, designing a life that avoids unnecessary storms. Both are powerful. The only question is, which toolkit will you pick up tomorrow morning? We have journeyed across one of the greatest intellectual jewels in history, but also one of the most personal. We uncovered that the Stoic is not cold and lifeless, but a master of emotions. That the Epicurean is not a wild hedonist, but a guardian of simplicity and peace. We saw how one builds an inner fortress of virtue, while the other cultivates a hidden garden of tranquility. We explored their views on the universe, on pain, on pleasure, on death, and on our place in society. And we opened their daily toolkits, finding practices that remain as relevant today as they were in ancient Athens or Rome. Now the mirror turns toward you. Which path resonates with your soul? Do you see yourself as the Stoic soldier, standing firm in the storm, embracing hardship as training for greatness and serving something larger than yourself? Or do you recognize yourself in the Epicurean sage, protecting peace of mind, surrounding yourself with friends and pruning away the unnecessary to savor life's simple joys? This is no abstract question. It is the choice that will shape the quality of your days, the way you face challenges, and the legacy you leave behind. If this exploration helped bring clarity, share your perspective in the comments. Are you a fighter in the arena or a gardener of serenity? And if this message inspired you, like this video and subscribe to the Stoic Lighthouse so that together we can continue cutting through the fog and discovering timeless wisdom for modern life. In our next journey, we will confront one of the deepest paradoxes of Stoic thought, how wealth and poverty, power and powerlessness can both become schools of virtue. How could one philosopher navigate immense riches while another lived with nothing, and yet both arrived at the same truths about freedom and happiness? The answers may challenge everything you believe about money and meaning. At the end of the day, both Stoicism and Epicureanism demand courage, the courage to live deliberately, to stop drifting through life, to step forward and actively decide how you will live, because the greatest danger is not to choose wrongly, but to never choose at all. As the Roman poet Horace urged long ago, sapere aude, dare to be wise, dare to choose, dare to live with purpose. See you in the next video.